Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I've been going out with a girl, her name is Julie, but last night she said to me when we were watching telly.
David has called from Worksop to carry on our conversation about poverty in the UK. David, hello.
Hello, yeah, I've got a quick question. You know this UN report relating to Britain? I've done a similar report for Chile, El Salvador and Paraguay and Russia and all the countries in Eastern Europe. Why are they picking on Britain?
It's not that they're picking on Britain. I will check for you. I imagine that it's a routine thing to do reports into the state of various nations, yeah.
Right, because I had something similar a while back, and it always seems to be... It sounds to me like somebody's asked them to do this report, because I don't believe that people in Britain are in more poverty than some of the poorer countries in the world.
That's not what he was saying. He didn't say that at any point in that report.
So why isn't he concerned about Chile and Paraguay?
I think he probably is, or somebody else doing his job probably is.
Right, okay. Just seems... it just senses there's some political... things going on behind the scenes. Because why do they even know about what's going on in Britain about universal credit? How would they know? Because I don't know what the benefit system is in Paraguay.
But what do you think the United Nations is? I mean, it's a union of nations, and they constantly talk about what the other nation is doing in and of itself and in relation to other people. And why wouldn't he know? You're
not telling me that a chap from the United Nations would have first-hand knowledge about the benefit system in every country that's part of the UN. They can't do, because most people...
Well, it's not the first time we've had these reports. There was one on violence against women back in 2014, and the government shot the messenger then as well.
But why? But they can't possibly, in all the work they've got to do, have first-hand knowledge of the benefit system in every country in the world, because otherwise they'd never get anything done. I just can't believe that we're just getting picked on all the time.
No, you've got a victim mentality if you think we're being picked on because the UN does an assessment of poverty in the United Kingdom. Why don't you want them to? Don't you want as much information as possible about your nation?
Surely it's our rights to make the decision and to look at it. But again...
Do you think a government that wants to stay in power, and I mean any government, not just this government, do you think a government that wants to stay in power is going to tell you the full truth about poverty?
I don't believe any of them to this, like the other chap said. But again, that would be really interesting to find out if they've done similar reports on.
They undoubtedly will have. I will do a check in this break, but I'm absolutely certain that they will have. But I'll make sure.
I bet. And where's this chap? We had a lady from Brazil did a report about poverty in Britain. People in Brazil are living in there's real poverty in Brazil. But why didn't she do a report onto her own country? This is what I cannot fathom it out.
It's a man, not a woman.
Well, there was a report. No, there was a UN commissioner before. It was a lady.
Oh, that was the violence against women.
I thought I'm sure there was another one that was about poverty. And I thought, well,
poverty is a form of violence, of course, if it's carried out deliberately, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I work for my living. I've worked since I was 16, and I just think people should work. I don't understand why.
You think people are causing their own poverty?
Well, I'm not saying it's as clear-cut as that, but I think we've gone away from when I left school, you got any job. It wasn't the job you wanted. You got a job, and then you stayed in the job until you got another job, and then you stayed in you hate... I've had jobs that I hate in the past, but that's not the point. The point is you're earning your own living, and that seems...
How old are you, David, if you don't mind my asking?
Sorry?
How old are you?
60.
Right. Well, I just wonder whether, the economic climate, I might be wrong, you tell me, but the economic climates that you have lived in over the years, you were able to lose a job on a Friday and get another one on a Monday and maybe able to afford mortgages or rent because of the price of those things at the time. And the situation is rather different post-2008, isn't it?
You would have been around in the 70s, you'd have seen some real poverty.
I was around in the 70s.
Holes in the shoes, we went to school. My father was a miner during the miners' strike in the 70s. strike pay it didn't exist. Unemployment benefit was totally negligible.
Yes, but nobody is saying that poverty is new to this country. What this UN report is saying is that a nation as wealthy as the UK shouldn't have individuals who are destitute. Even people who are working, trying to get the jobs that you're talking about, David, are finding that they're living in poverty, and persistent poverty, not just a period of poverty for which they need help from the benefit system, but persistent poverty. What I'm hearing from these calls is a great deal of resistance to the idea that a single British family is living in deep poverty. I wonder why.
Do you think Twitter is the best resource to understand how much bitterness and anger there is out there, not least because not everyone in the country is on Twitter, and also it is a place, famously, where this sort of bile and vitriol gets stirred up?
Well, I'll tell you honestly, Tom, I only joined Twitter a month and a half ago, and I'll tell you what, I've had some followers on it. I can actually direct Donald Trump a direct message. He's following me. So is Kellyanne Conway. So is Laura, what's her name? Laura Geller, Laura Ingraham on Fox News. She's following me. I can text her a tweet as well. What's happening is with Twitter is you can now send something out and it goes to, I can send one tweet and 10,000 people have got it within a minute.
That is the beauty of social media. James, hang on the line. Adam's in Westminster. Hi, Adam.
Good evening, Tom.
Hello, mate. What do you make about James's point that this is going to happen if she signs this deal? There's going to be chaos.
Well, I hope James has got a nuclear bunker, because it sounds like we've been escalated from Project Fear to Project Armageddon. What an absolute load of nonsense. What he needs to do is to make himself a cup of tea, sit down and relax. And as they said interestingly in that movie, Shaun of the Dead, it'll all blow over in the morning. Nothing to worry about. If you're looking for an excuse to have a riot, go for it. But as far as I'm concerned, again, this is Project Armageddon. It's absolutely ridiculous. No foundation. James needs to get a bit more grown up and mature in his outlook, instead of thinking that all these army boots are going to be running up and down the streets of the UK with their rifles ready to shoot people coming out of Blockbuster video shops and McDonald's stealing hamburgers. What a joke.
James?
Well, I couldn't get his name, but all I'll say to Adam, all I'll say to you,
Adam in Westminster, don't forget Adam.
Well, I didn't interrupt you, so don't interrupt me. All I can say to you, Adam, is you've completely misrepresented exactly what I just said. I was not advocating violence, and I certainly wasn't advocating that I ended up in violence or I ended up rioting. What I explained, which you clearly did not listen to, what I explained was the level of anger that is out there, right, in our streets. It's probably in your own street.
James, what you're doing, you're not making any sense, mate, because you're articulating that there's a reason for people to get angry because they don't like the way the Brexit has been going. So I haven't misunderstood you in any way, shape or form, sir. So you get your facts straight before you start overloading and telling me what I did or did not say. You need to get more grasp of the Queen's English game.
The problem with you...
Hang on a sec, Adam, hang on. Let James come back on that. You've made your point.
No, the problem with you, Adam, you're clearly a Remain voter, and you don't... You're the elitist sort of person
Adam, hang on, Adam.
Who wants to talk over people because you think your opinion is better than ours. And let me tell you, Sunshine, it is not. We voted out to leave. We didn't vote for part leave, one foot in, one foot out. This isn't the okey-cokey. We voted for leave, to get out, full stop and barrel, lock, stock and barrel. And I don't really care what you think about me, but don't come on this programme and start pontificating, thinking that you know about what I'm talking about. You have got the entire exact example of the lording over, holier than thou, Ramona attitude over Brexiteers. And people like you make me absolutely sick. And people like you, Adam, are the entire reason why people like me voted for Brexit and people like me in America voted for Trump, because exactly as people like you.
Can I retort, James, you clown? I usually go to Zippo Circus to be entertained. Mr. Swarbrick will actually...
James, you've made your point. Hang on a sec, James. You've made your point, sir. You've made your point. Adam, go ahead. You get a chance to respond.
Thank you, sir. I think Mr. Swarbrick will enlighten you, James, as well as to my affiliations with regards to Brexit. Just because you assumed wrongly again, because obviously you're a clown. I actually voted for Brexit, and Tom knows my views on this very well.
Well, you've shouted them on the radio before, Adam. Yeah, I'm aware.
Thank you, Mr. Swarbrick. Thank you. So obviously this guy, you've got a problem with your hearing, James, because you don't understand where I'm coming from. That's why you need to join Zippel's circus immediately, because your talents are best suited there, because you obviously talk like a clown, behave like a clown, and you're sounding like a clown to the million listeners on LBC Radio because you didn't open the flaps and listen.
Adam, that's a bit rude.
Really? Can I speak now, Tom?
Yep.
Yeah, really, Adam. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, for all your listeners nationwide, you've insulted me about 4 times, right? Now, this is the typical characteristics. You're pretending to be a Brexiteer when really you're a Remoaner.
How do you know that?
What you Remoaners do
he says that he votes for Brexit.
Let me finish. I didn't interrupt you. Let me finish. All you people have got is insults against Brexiteers. You cannot win the argument because you have not got one single solitary sole reason, good reason for staying in the EU, and therefore the only thing you do is insult Brexiteers, and that is exactly what you have done, Adam, on national radio. So you, my friend, are the one that needs to be ashamed of yourself, not me.
Well, I'm not your friend, James, first of all, so don't even make that statement. And secondly, as Tom will attest to, I'm actually a Brexiteer, but unlike you, I actually speak sense. I didn't interrupt you when you spoke.
Hang on, James, hang on a sec. Adam, are you lying that you voted for Brexit?
Absolutely not, Mr. Swarbrick. No, I'm absolutely wanting to.
I can even smell your body language from down the phone. You're not a Brexiteer. You're a pretend Brexiteer. You're a liar.
James, you can't know this. You're just making false accusations about
something. If the guy's a psychologist, I can tell by his words. It's not often
you're a psychologist.
What you don't say.
Well, Mr. Swarbrick, I apologise that you have to put up with this nonsense diatribe coming out of this gentleman's mouth. He clearly doesn't understand my viewpoint. You see, you have to interrupt him because he hasn't.
James, hang on. Adam, you're going to have to go ahead, but you're going to have to keep it brief.
Yeah, I just reiterate what I've already said. He's better off joining Zippel Circus because obviously he's got his talents lying there being a clown. As far as I'm concerned, at the end of the day, there'll be no military running around the streets of the UK, whether we have a Brexit or no Brexit, Tom. The reality is it's gone from Project Fear to Project Armageddon, and clowns like James do the Brexiteer process a bad name, and he should get a reality check. Thank you, Mr. Swarbrick.
Clinton, particularly in the responses in this series of interviews, sounded to me like she was refusing to look at self, refusing to look at policies unrelated to immigration that have led to people feeling like they have no other answer but to lash out at their politicians. Simon in Basingstoke, hello.
Hello, Sheila. I think I can answer one of your questions just from my own work experience when you're talking about Eastern Europe.
Yeah. Or just Europe generally, not just Eastern Europe.
Well, in Europe, actually, Europe and France, I can speak to particularly because I've travelled. I've worked extensively in both, and the attitude I would say in France is that, to be honest, they perceive the situation is out of control, and even many people who I would classify in this country as fairly left wing generally hold that position as well. Paris itself has changed massively.
Perceive or know? Different things, aren't they?
It's not just the perception. I was travelling in Paris through a main railway station and saw someone being mugged at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Now, I would suggest to you that I would be unlikely to see that at Waterloo Station, for instance, in the UK, at least at the moment. And with regards to Eastern Europe,
really?
I think you've had a large number of people in Eastern Europe who've worked in Western European countries, France, UK, elsewhere, and they have seen the impact of mass migration, and they don't want it for their country. A lot of Polish people who've settled in, for instance, Sweden, are returning to Poland when they want to bring up families because they feel that Poland is much safer.
Well, Poland has very little impact from migration, and it is put a far right government into power, interestingly, even though it has been entirely unaffected by the migration crisis of 2015.
It has, but you can see, I've seen measurable changes in Paris just in the last 10 years. Changes that I would never have expected. And I've seen the same changes in my own
Just be
country.
specific about those changes.
Well, I grew up I'm calling from Basingstoke in Hampshire. When I grew up here, I lived in London for 30 years and recently returned about 5 years ago. Since I've returned to Basingstoke in the last 5 years, the ethnic makeup of this town has changed substantially.
From what to what?
Well, it's gone from, I'd say, probably 80% sort of basically native people to like 25-30%, not just Eastern Europeans, but people from, there seems to be a large Afghan community here, and other communities. And like anything else, migration should be in the interests of the people that live in the country.
Yes, it should.
And I think people deny. I don't see the benefits of that. I enjoyed going from a monocultural society, which I grew up in, to a university that 25% of the students were from foreign nations. But there's a difference between that and the culture of the town in which you grew up in and living in changing.
Well,
and that's something that people have to accept.
Yeah, I mean, you have every right to your view on. Everybody has every right to their view on the level of migration that they want in their community and in the wider community called country, called nation. Of course, I'm not saying that we don't, and I'm not saying that sometimes difficult political conversations need to be had around it. But do you accept, Simon, that the conversations that are had about it, the statements that are made about it, whether it's from the far right or Theresa May on Monday or Hillary Clinton in this Guardian interview, are just clumsy, simplistic, little pastiches of what migration brings to this country and has for decades brought to this country? For centuries brought to this country.
I think there's a very good answer to that, Sheila, and that's a very good point. We were promised prior to the referendum to have information released about how many non-UK nationals were receiving tax credits. That's never been released. We're constantly told it's an economic benefit.
Bear in mind that's a working.
Bear in mind
that's a working credit. Bear in mind that's a working person's credit.
It is, but that is substantial. If you get JSA, believe me, I've been on JSA before. It's tough enough to live on that. If you're getting working tax credits, that's in the several thousands of pounds.
And what does that tell us?
Well, that tells us if someone moves here who is a hard-working person with his family of 2 children, and he's working very hard in a minimum wage job. His wife is working very hard in a minimum wage job. We're educating those 2 children. The 2 parents and the children are never sick. The taxes those people pay will not even cover the educational costs of their children. So how is that a benefit to me?
Well, it depends whether you're talking about an instant or a lifetime, because the same argument, Simon, could have been made to, say, my parents in the 60s when they had 7 kids, came over from Ireland, had 7 kids, free education, free health service. My dad was the only person working in the house for about 10 years before we were all a bit grown up, and then my mum did as well. And you could say that. You could say the tax that my dad was giving to this nation in no way covered a life, years of school age for 7 children and healthcare and all the rest of it. And yet, that same family have gone on to be, all of us, good earners, taxpayers in public services, police, midwives, lawyers, my job, public health, you name it. So there you go. There's your return.
Yeah, so it's taken 30, 40 years to return.
And
that's a really good investment, Sheila. You're a brilliant broadcaster, but I don't think I'd hire you as my financial advisor.
Why are you rejecting that point? The point is, by the way, when people like my father and others, the Windrush generation, were coming over to the UK, the doors were wide open. And why were they wide open? Because they were needed. Their labour was needed. And now we have over 100,000. In the space of a year, it's rocketed. We have over 100,000 vacancies in adult social care. You mark my words, Simon, you might hear and want immigration to be down to the tens of thousands, but we won't be solving that problem without migrants.
Well, can I say one further thing? What are these migrants going to do in 10 or 15 years' time when artificial intelligence is not just taking over all the driving jobs and all those sort of lower, like no-skilled or low-skilled jobs, but is taking over other jobs, high-level, white-collar jobs. You have to look beyond the immediate time horizon to what is a foreseeable future. Look at what Japan's doing. Japan does not have the security issues, the crime issues this country has.
Don't worry. In 10 to 15 years' time, when little Japanese robots are doing everything, Simon, we'll have a policy akin to the Windrush one and just send everybody home. Thank you for your call, Simon. Rita's call from Barking on this. Hello.
Oh, hello.
What did you want to say, Rita?
I just wanted to say I listened to your show for quite a while, and I'm being an immigrant myself. I think, to be honest, I think it's opinions like yours and people in the media in particular, which is leading people to the far right. I don't think it's immigrants. I'm being an immigrant myself. I think it is this refusal to have a balanced debate. I honestly think that a lot of people, when people call about this discussion or try to have the discussion, it always comes back to you must be a racist, and they refuse to ever.
I haven't called anybody a racist.
Well, you do kind of give snide comments on occasion and sort of imply that, maybe not call people racist directly.
Well, do you know, Rita, I, with all due respect to you, I reject what you're saying. And I reject what you're saying because I began this hour and I thread any conversation I have with immigration with this. We can have a serious, grown-up, challenging, even uncomfortable discussion about what we in this country do and do not want from immigration. Nothing wrong with that. But what I'm seeing isn't that.
So what would you say is a negative of immigration?
A negative of immigration?
Yeah.
Well, if people come here and don't work and have no intention of working and just take from the state, that can't be a good thing for the state, can it? Why are adults coming to do that? And probably for criminal reasons would be my guess. But if people come with young families or come to work as young people or come because they have a great skill that this country needs or a more typical, ordinary skill that this country needs, then that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that discussion is hard to have.
Why?
Particularly in the media.
I have it all the time. I have it all the time on this program.
Well, yeah, but you too tend to have a bias. Not just you, but it's a lot of the media tend to have a bias.
What's my bias?
That you sort of tar this brush of anybody who doesn't think of immigration as completely 100% positive.
I don't think it's 100% positive all the time. It depends entirely what the nature of it is. So I don't. The reason, I think you're probably referring to my conversation with Simon, and the reason I tackled Simon as strongly as I did is he wasn't being reasonable about immigration. He wasn't saying this country needs migrants and here are the ways in which it's a good thing and let's talk about those things. He was saying, I like where I live to be white, essentially.
Well, no, he wasn't saying
monoculture. He didn't say white, but he talked about a monoculture, native. The woman has just called me as a native of this country. It's just that her parents aren't.
So do you think that British people should have a right to have a culture?
Of course. No,
why is Simon wrong in saying he wanted where he lived to have a culture, of his culture?
But would you regard somebody who only wants to live with white people as just wanting to protect their culture, or would you regard?
Say white, did he?
But you and I are discussing white now.
No, but you said Simon. I didn't say white. He didn't say white.
He said monoculture. And in the UK, what do you think that is?
Well, okay, let's say white, because I'm not discussing white. So,
well, should we just say a British monoculture, and then will we know what that means?
Well, okay, I'm not saying that means white, but you can say you think.
You don't have to say it. What do you say it means?
When I think in terms of British culture, I think sort of.
No, he didn't say British culture. He said monoculture.
Oh, okay, fine, yeah.
So does that mean white, maybe?
I don't know what he meant by that, but that's not what I.
What's your best guess, Rita?
I would see it as a collective idea of shared values, just a shared culture as any other country have, like a Japanese culture or an American culture, whatever. So it's the same thing. Like I visited Japan a lot. They have a very strong, a very beautiful culture, and it's a beautiful thing. We don't go over there and say, "Oh, this is disgusting." That they have this beautiful Japanese culture. They're not allowed to have it. We must bring over loads of people, and these little villages and whatever. They're not allowed to have this little culture. So why is it that when Simon says that about his hometown, that's somehow a bad thing?
You are allowed to be happy with where you live and happy with your culture. But if a black or brown or foreign face comes into it. Mm-hmm. You've got to have a really good reason to reject them, don't you think?
But I don't think it's about it being a brown or a black face. It's about the change in the culture is what he was talking about.
Which he couldn't particularly name, could he? I asked him to give me examples, and he just said Afghans and Eastern Europeans. That was his example. That was all he could tell me about them. He didn't tell me.
Okay,
he didn't tell me what they were doing. He didn't tell me what was good or bad about them. So I concluded, I think fairly reasonably, that he just wants to be around British people only.
Okay, but
is that okay?
Well, okay, if we put aside, like, he wanted to be around white people or British people, whatever, I think that's, like, fairly standard in terms of how cultures work. I mean, when, Little England, and if you go to, in Portugal, there's little groups of different cultures. That's just how people work, because they go to what they know. I don't think that necessarily makes you racist or weird. And I think it's the large numbers so quickly, which maybe has caused the issue. I don't think that's racist. It's just has changed the country quite.
Yeah, and yet the areas with the least immigration, with the least change that you're talking about there, Rita, voted to leave more than those where the most immigration was taking place, which again raises questions. I think you'd agree.
And we're going to Paul on the line from Bristol. Speak to us, Paul.
Hi, Maajid. How are you?
I'm all right. Tell us what you think.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to answer it as quickly as I possibly can. Your question is, what should Theresa May and the government do if it's rejected in Parliament? And the simple solution is, you have another referendum, but not a referendum on whether we vote to remain. You have a referendum on whether we accept Theresa May's deal or whether we leave on WTO terms.
You mean there shouldn't be a remain option there?
There should not be a remain option.
Why do you say that?
Because people talk about 52 to 48%. People always break it down to the lowest denominator. The fact of the matter is there was a difference of 1.3 million people that decided to leave as opposed to remain. And I live in Bristol. That's double the population of my city. That's a lot of people.
Well, how many voted in total to leave?
How many people voted in total to leave?
Yeah.
Well, as you said earlier, 37%.
No, but how many is that in millions, do you say?
17.4 million people voted to leave.
And how many voted to stay?
16.1 million people decided to stay.
So in numbers that large, Paul, does it,
yes.
in numbers, when we're talking 17.4 million and 16.1 million,
yes.
the difference there over such a constitutional question, over such large numbers, I think
yes.
it is somewhat, I think, forgive the word, but petty to make it about the 1 million in the middle there.
Well, 1.3 million people is a large percentage of the people that voted.
It's not that, but Paul, sorry, I don't know where you did your maths. By the very definition of the word percentage, it's not large, right? We look at 16.1 million people voting to remain versus 17.4 million people voting to stay. The difference between 48.11% and 51.89% is not, by the very definition of the meaning of the word in the English language, is not a large percentage. Unless you're going to change the meaning of the word percentage, Paul.
Okay, let's put this another way. More people went out and voted for the referendum than any other vote that we've had in history.
For the referendum, not for leave?
For the referendum,
yes.
More people went out.
And they were pretty much evenly
people...
split in that referendum.
Well,
we're not going to get anywhere with the numbers, Paul. All it means is you won by 4%. That's what it means.
I disagree with you there, because if 17.4 million people voted to leave, and there's a difference of 1.6 million, that's a very large, that's, in my opinion, and most people's opinion in the country, that's a very large opinion, and you cannot ignore those people.
It's a lot of people, but it's not a lot of people when compared to the total number of people. Can you see that? Paul, if I offered you, here, let me put it in a different way, right? If I have, because this is not going to get you anywhere. If I said to you, Paul, you know what, Paul, all right? Paul, I'm going to give you £17.4 million on condition that you give 1 million of that to charity. would you stop and say, what's 1 million compared to 17.4? Of course, Maajid, I'll take the 74 point. If it means giving 1 million to charity, yeah, that means I end up with 16.4 million. It's still loads of money. Give me the 17.4 million and I'll give you the million charity immediately. Do you see the point I'm trying to make, Paul? That when you're talking in those such large sums of such large numbers, the 1 million you're now prepared to fight over proportionately isn't actually that much.
I disagree with you.
Well, it's 4%, Paul. That's not a lot.
It might be 4%, and it's been broken down to the smallest denominator because
no, it's not. 4% is not the smallest denominator. It's the percentage of the 1 million number you're talking about. That's not the smallest denominator. That is simply the difference between the two numbers. It's 4%, which isn't a lot. That's the meaning of the word percent, Paul.
Yeah, the thing is...
I'm literally banging my head on the table, look.
No, I'm sorry.
That's the sound of my head banging on the table, Paul.
We're talking about voters. We're talking about votes. We're talking about the number of people that voted to leave, and that's, each voter's opinion is a lot more important than pounds and lottery wins and things like that. We're talking about people's opinion, and it's being ignored.
Paul, it's not being ignored. It hasn't been ignored for 2 years. A Remain supporting Prime Minister has attempted not to ignore that 1 million people in this country, and the rest of the half on either side are now frustrated because what she's brought back in an attempt not to ignore that 4% margin is something that makes neither side happy. Let me put it a different way, Paul. If that same 4% of people now supported Theresa May's deal, right? Just the 4% margin that you're willing to argue with me over, if that 4% margin now backed Theresa May's deal, while the rest of us, hard Brexiteers and Remainers, still don't want to support Theresa May's deal, would you be willing to say, well, the 4%, that's 1 million people, that's a lot of people who are backing Theresa May's deal, so it should pass because 1 million's a lot of people?
Yes, I would, because democracy is democracy, and it's the will of the people.
So you support Theresa May's deal?
No, I don't support Theresa May's deal because I think it's better. It's worse than what we currently have at the moment.
Right.
It's an in between, and like everybody else, I agree there that I agree with you there. That's
that question I just asked you, and you said you would support Theresa May's deal over that 4%. I said to you, if the 4% you're arguing with me over decided to back Theresa May's deal, would you still be? Would you be satisfied with that?
You said to me, if there was another referendum, and the majority of people decided to support Theresa May's
No, that's not what I said. That wasn't my question.
Would I go along?
No, Paul, that wasn't. Let me ask you the question again, because that wasn't my question. I'll ask it again. You're arguing that the 1 million difference between Remain and Leave voters is a lot of people. I said, OK, if that same 1 million, which is 4% of the difference between Leave and Remain, who voted in the referendum, if that same 4%, the 1.6 whatever it was million, decided to back Theresa May's deal, would you then argue that Theresa May's deal should pass, even if the rest of us, Brexiters and Remainers, opposed her deal?
What I'm saying is, if there is a referendum and a decision is made, then that's democracy, and I would go along with the decision. I will not argue it.
So why is it okay for us to have general elections whenever the Prime Minister calls them in this country, if we've already voted for a general election? So, for example, when Theresa May called a general election last time, it was a snap election, wasn't it? We'd already voted.
Yes, it was.
Why is it okay for her to call another election, and why was it not okay for somebody like me to say democracy means democracy, you're not allowed to call another election?
Well, she wasn't elected by the people. She was elected by...
That's not my question, Paul. Let me ask you my question again. Please address it. Why is it okay for a government, after having had a general election, to decide to call another general election? And why is it not okay for me at that stage to say, but we just had a general election, so it's undemocratic for you to call another one, and if you do, that means this country is a dictatorship and democracy is dead, and I warn you about violence in the streets? Why is it not okay for me to say that during a snap general election when it's called, Paul?
Well, we don't make the rules on parliamentary elections. Politicians make the rules, and they are the rules. And if the rules state that they can call a snap election, then they are the rules, and they're just like the laws that we abide by. They're the laws that...
So what do the rules say about calling a snap referendum, Paul?
Well, the way I see it is this is going to go to Parliament. It's going to be...
Paul, what do the rules say in this country about calling a snap referendum?
they say that you can call snap a referendum as opposed to election.
Well, I'm asking you what the difference is between calling a snap general election, if the rules allow it, that you've just said is okay, and calling a snap referendum, if the rules allow it, which surely by your logic is also okay.
What I'm saying to you is we've already voted on leave. That's already been decided.
Just like we already voted for a government in a general election, but Theresa May decided to call another general election, which changed the government from a majority Conservative government to a minority Conservative government in a confidence and supply arrangement with the DUP. Why was that not illegitimate if we'd already voted? And you said the reason it wasn't is because the rules in this country allow for another general election when called by the Prime Minister. So I'm asking you again, what's the difference between a snap general election when the rules allow it and a snap referendum when the rules allow it? Why is one still democratic and the other suddenly not democratic?
Well, look, if I bring you back to the last general election, more people voted Conservative in that last general election than at any election since 1992. So,
Paul, can you answer my question, please?
But can you answer my question?
No, I asked you a question.
Why is that not testament that people voted for Brexit?
Paul, if it's okay to call another general election 2 years into a general election when Parliament states they should be every 5 years, why is it not okay to call another referendum?
Because that's already been decided on. But when we
had the government in a general election, Paul. Well, how does what you're saying make any sense? A government's already been decided on in a general election as well.
When we voted in 2015, we voted for a Conservative government with David Cameron at the helm. When we voted at the next election, we voted for a new Prime Minister that had been voted by her ministers.
No, because you didn't vote for the DUP's involvement first time round, and I suspect nobody voted for a Conservative government in coalition with the DUP the second time round either. The same argument would apply. Why is it okay to call snap general elections once we've already had one, and not okay to call another referendum?
Because the people were asked. I know a lot of people that voted Remain because they were afraid of what was going to happen to the economy.
That's not the question.
Because of all the warnings against Brexit.
Paul, I suspect you're not going to be able to answer the question because I've been trying to get an answer out of you for as long as you've had this entire first hour, a quarter of an hour of the show. And it really does demonstrate, actually, that those who argue that a second people's vote would be undemocratic because of a non-legally binding referendum that happened 2 years ago would be hard-pressed to make the same case for a general election 2 years into the forming of a government, as just happened with Theresa May. It is the Prime Minister's prerogative to call a snap election if she has the conditions met to do so in Parliament before the 5-year term expires. All it requires really is for Parliament to vote it. Likewise, it is Parliament's prerogative, led by the PM, to call for a people's vote as well. Neither outcomes are undemocratic because in this country, more democracy never means a lack of democracy. It is that simple. Now, you may argue you don't like the outcome. I could see that. I could actually sympathise with that if it was called before Theresa May's deal was announced. Then I'd say to you, I'm with you, actually, it's a bit rude of the rest of us Remainers to actually call a people's vote when you lot won the referendum. But in the context of Theresa May's deal being announced, in the context of Brexiters and Remainers wanting to reject the deal, it is not undemocratic to give us a say as to whether we accept her deal, reject her deal, or the third option that she mentioned in her own speech, decide that the whole project in the first place is disastrous.
Clint's in Croydon. Clint, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi. Good morning to you. Right, okay, first and foremost, I would like to say that I am a Brexiteer. I voted no. I didn't want to stay with the EU. So I didn't vote for a deal. I voted to leave. I understand that when the Remainers stood up and voiced Cameron, etc., it was all about GDP. That was all it was about. There was nothing about the country and people's feelings.
No, there was loads about what the economic impact would be on each individual family, wasn't there? So no, Clint, I'm happy to listen to you, but if you say something that's not true, my job is to stop you and correct you. There was an awful lot from Mark Carney, from George Osborne, from David Cameron, from lots of other Leave campaigners explaining what the economic impact would be personally, explaining the possibility of factories closing, explaining what the actual sum of money reduced from each individual family budget would be. So there was also talk about GDP, but what you just said isn't true.
I understand that,
Good.
but obviously it was all speculative. But the reality is that's not really why I'm calling. The situation
then
is that
why not start with the reason why you are calling instead of starting with the reason why you're not calling, being corrected, and then somehow trying to gloss over the mistake that you just made?
Well, I don't feel I have made a mistake.
Okay, so I'll say it again. Frequently, throughout the referendum campaign, people were told about prices going up in shops, about a reduction in their personal expenditure capabilities, about the precise sum of money which each family could potentially lose. That is not GDP, that is personal budgetary explanation. So when you said it was all about GDP and they never mentioned anything else, you were just wrong, my friend. So let's scratch that and start again.
Distinguishing between GDP, it was never about how people that they can't get into the doctors, dentists, all those other things.
No, that's immigration. That's nothing to do with economics.
Okay, if I can get to the point of why I'm calling, because I accept we are where we are.
Yes.
And from what I can understand, the big problem is the backstop. Now, the dangers are, according to what we're understanding on the media, is that we could be caught and the EU are going to control exactly when we can possibly leave that.
No, the arrangement is, and I completely sympathise with your failure to understand this because you're having all sorts of nonsense poured into your ears by all sorts of people. There is a group of Brexiteers, as you like to call yourself, who claim that it's really, really easy to solve the problem of the Irish border, but they are simultaneously furious about the suggestion that we can't fully cut our ties with the European Union until that solution to the Irish border has been put in place. So the people you're in bed with are arguing on the one hand that it's really, really easy to do it, and on the other hand that we can't have doing it as a condition of leaving. So there is a contradiction there that I hope now I've explained it, Clint, you can see very clearly.
Yeah, for sure. I'm not...
Well, tell me what I just said, Clint.
100% it's not easy.
Clint, tell me what I just said.
Okay, well, can I just suggest...
No, because I'm not sure you're listening. And if you're not listening to what I'm saying, this isn't a conversation. So what did I just say
You're
about
saying that the Brexiteers, which I believe I am one of them, think it's very, very simple to solve.
No, they don't think it is. They know it isn't. They're lying and saying that it's very simple to solve.
Well, obviously, that's your opinion. No, I accept
okay, so
that.
what's the simple solution then?
But what I'm suggesting or asking whether it is feasible is that if both the EU and the UK were to put down their criteria required for the backstop to...
No, it doesn't work like that. The criteria required for the backstop to finish is regulatory alignment on both sides of the Irish border, as enshrined in the Good Friday Agreement.
Which can't be...
Which is already written down. Which is... Well, it can be achieved at the moment, according to the people you support. But they just won't tell you how it can be achieved, and they'll say we can't possibly sign up to something that requires it to be achieved, even though it's really easy to achieve it. Do you not feel yet, during this conversation, that you've been mugged?
No, I don't.
Okay, so the solution is simple, but they don't know what it is. Well, it has to be in place before we can leave, and they're objecting to the idea that it has to be in place before we can leave, despite... No, here we go. This is why I wanted you to repeat back to me what I've said, because now you're just doing platitudes. I've explained to you what's going on.
I mean, the thing is, it is a phone-in show, and all I'm asking is to be heard.
No, Clint, you phoned in and said one thing. I pointed out it was wrong. You said that wasn't why you phoned in. You said something else. I've pointed out why it was wrong, and now you're insisting on being heard. So you carry on. Fill your boots.
Presenting who I was and what I believe.
But it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not if I can prove that it's not true, Clint.
That disagree with the deal that Theresa May is trying to put this country in. Okay?
Yes, but they've got, Clint, is the idea... Oh, Clint, you keep talking, mate.
Could be oversee the situation, that then nobody would change it for their own advantage.
You mean a supranational institution like the European Court of Justice, for example?
No, an independent. A country, maybe to put it to a country like Canada.
Right, so we take back control by putting Canada in charge of Brexit.
Well, I'm not saying that. That isn't what I said.
What did you say then, Clint? Because those are the words I heard.
No, well, if you can listen...
Yes, I am listening, Clint.
I said the backstop seems to be the problem. I accept...
The problem with what, Clint?
Theresa May has done a deal, but the problem seems to be from both parties...
I tell you what, mate, you are not making my day.
The problem.
Yes.
Because obviously, you believe what you believe. But
No. Belief plays no part. Belief plays no part in my position, Clint. This is where you and I diverge, you see. You ring me up and you tell me that the backstop is the problem and that Canada should somehow be in charge of overseeing it. I say to you, so you want Canada to be in charge of Brexit. You say, no, I never said that. Then you tell me that you believe there's something better out there. I explain to you why there isn't. You say, well, I believe there is, but I can't tell you what it is. And then you say, well, you believe something different. And I now say to you, I don't believe something different. I understand the facts of the matter. You believe that they're not facts. And I wonder what it would take for you to recognise that your beliefs are bogus. And I suspect there's nothing at all that could do that, Clint. What?
I believe yours are.
Yes, but I've just explained why they're not, with reference to the treaty, the Good Friday Agreement, with reference to the enshrined necessity of regulatory alignment, with the observation that this supranational body that you want to preside over Brexit would not involve taking back control, it would involve giving it to a third party. You suggested Canada, I suggested the European Court of Justice. Every single thing I've said is a recorded, demonstrable fact, and all you keep saying to me is, I believe that you're wrong. The bottom line, my friend, is that I'm not.
Or Andy is in Leicester. Andy, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. Good morning.
Hello, mate.
James, just regarding your commentary with, the sort of immigration side of things, I don't think that's quite accurate on the fact that people voted to leave. I think most people obviously just want some sort of control coming into the country for our public services, really.
Yes, but we had that already.
Well, not with freedom of movement. I mean, there's no way you can control that. And have,
there is
specific numbers.
There is, actually.
And how's that done?
Well, you read the Citizens' Charter and you learn that in order to move into a member state, you have to demonstrate that you have sufficient material wealth not to become a burden upon the social service providers of that state. And if you haven't found employment after 3 months, you can be required to leave.
But that still leaves a 3-month window, I suppose. And, I think the point is...
Say that again, Andy.
Does that leave a window of 3 months for people just to come and...
Look for a job for 3 months. You just said that out loud on national radio, mate. So we're banning holidays now, are we?
No, I get your point with that. What I'm saying is I think people are just concerned that it doesn't appear that we had any controls.
So why are these people in the Channel at the moment risking their lives in dinghies if it's easy just to waltz through the borders, mate?
It's a fair point. I just think that...
Well, you need to answer it because it's a response to your point.
Well, my point, what I phoned in to say was that obviously I think for a lot of people, perhaps the decision came on the fact that, they can't get into a lot of the public services that they need. And I think they felt that maybe that was because they're under pressure with...
but that's not actually what you say, because if you had said that, I'd ask you which public service you've been denied access to and whether or not you thought that a swinging round of cuts since the year 2010 might have had more to do with a diminishment of service everywhere from the police to the NHS than the population of people that relies upon the police and the NHS, regardless of their geographical origins. And then I'd have referred you to the number of people born elsewhere who work within the NHS and the police and social care and all the other areas of employment that are considered in some ways to be at the bottom of the ladder and undesirable for some native-born Britons. And then I'd remind you that you've just said on national radio, well, maybe 3 months is too long, which means you're in favour of abolishing holidays.
No, I like holidays, believe me.
Well,
but,
there's cognitive dissonance. I want to ban holidays, but I really like them.
Well, that's just why I think that a lot of people have,
Really, I'm sure you're right, but they're idiots. You can see that now.
Well, maybe not informed properly, but...
not just not informed properly, because that's forgivable. Then I point out to them that they're not informed properly, and they still argue from a position of ignorance. What choice do we have but to call them idiots, Andy?
Well... I'll take your point. I'll take your point on that.
But tomorrow you'll still call yourself a Brexiter, right?
Yeah, I am. Yes, I am. You know,
and there it is.
All...
There it is, mate. Right there. Everything you've said pulled to shreds on national radio. You've ended up arguing against holidays, and you still think you're on the right side of this decision, but you haven't got a Scooby-Doo as to why. Except, forgive me, mate, but you said it. Too many foreigners.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, you kind of did.
I think I agree with you. People coming into the national, we need.
Andy.
I'm losing you a bit.
Okay, so what is your reason for wanting to leave the European Union if it's not too many foreigners? Bless him. It's coming up to 11:30. You're listening to Joe. Oh, hang on, I'm losing you a little bit there. Can't quite. That's the question, isn't it? Why would you still, having just done that on national radio, why would you still think that you're on the right side? Reduced to pretending that the phone line has gone down. I bear him no ill will. I bear him no malice. His life will not get better after we leave the European Union. He will be worse off. If there are fewer foreigners around, then according to most economic analysis, he'll be even more worse off than he would be if there wasn't, because foreigners are customers. It's the cab drivers. I sit there. They bend my ear on Brexit, often politely. And I say, so you voted to have fewer customers, did you? I thought business was bad at the moment, lads. Oh, I didn't vote to have fewer customers. Well, you kind of did. First bloke to tell me he was leaving Britain after that referendum result came in was a city banker, a German city banker. Actually, he was Dutch, but he was moving to Germany. He gets a taxi, a black cab to work on the radio taxis every single morning from Chiswick to the city. What's the fare on that? He doesn't even use Addison Lee. I don't know why. He's gone already. Kids are at the same school as my kid. He's gone. You voted for him to leave. What are you voting for? Fewer customers, less money, declining wealth, poorer economy. Why? Foreigners, James. Really? Is that all you've got? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm losing you. The phone line's going down. Go, click.
Ryan in Leicester, hello.
Hi, Sheila, how are you?
I'm okay, thanks. You're not that bothered about the economic warnings, no?
No. Anyone that says that they can see past it, I think is either lying or a fool. But I take it with a pinch of salt. I voted for Brexit, and in the run-up to it, we was given, I won't call them scaremongering stories, but we was given all the information from the various bodies on the economics of it. And we was told at the time by George Osborne that a vote to leave and a referendum result that would result in as a leaving would result in an instant recession.
Yes.
That never happened. Mm-hmm. So I do take it with a pinch of salt, not because I think that it's all scaremongering, but because we've been told it before, and what we're not also taking into consideration is what the EU is going to be in the next 10 years. We're going off that they're going to maintain the status quo, that every other country within the EU is going to carry on as is. I don't think that's going to be the case, and it may be that us jumping ship first puts us in a better position. I don't have all the answers. I'm not.
Nobody does, Ryan. Nobody does. No. From top to bottom, nobody does.
But I think that the narrative from so many people is very blinkered. James, who was on there before, I agree with him on so much, but I think that his mindset on this is outrageous. How that you can see your cup as half empty on all of this, when knowing that we were told that we were going to be into a recession, and knowing everything that everyone's been wrong about over politics worldwide the last 4 years, how we can carry on.
But hang on a sec, though. But the thing is, Ryan, that at this point in time, at this point in the process, we have our own Chancellor and our own Prime Minister accepting that the deal that she has got, the deal that the government has got, is still not as economically strong as the position we are in today. Now, I take all the points you made about the future of the European Union and the future. There's lots of elements in the future that none of us can predict. However, if a political party was campaigning on a platform of saying, look, we're going to make you economically weaker, vote for us, you wouldn't vote for them, would you?
Well, no, but I mean, that was the same story before the vote.
No, but the point is, but now they're saying to you, you've told us to leave the European Union, and we're going to do it. And for some people, that is a thing to be admired. For some people think, yes, good, they're honouring the referendum result, great. But if in a slightly different scenario, i.e. a general election, if any party said, we are going to deliberately make you poorer, you simply wouldn't vote for them.
No.
But in this scenario, because Brexit is attached to it, you have the Chancellor of the Exchequer, whose job it is to try to make everyone in the country that bit better off, saying it is the right thing to do for me and my colleagues to take actions that I can clearly see will make us worse off. There you go. You wouldn't vote for them, would you?
No, you're right, you wouldn't.
And yet we are in our droves. People are in their droves still saying, keep doing it, keep driving towards Brexit, keep doing it, because it's about Brexit. But if you dressed it up in a general election and said the same thing, you'd probably get not a single vote.
Well, we're in the situation that we are in. And like I said, I don't have the answers. I don't think anyone out there has any answers. I think it is all complete speculation. It's never happened before. So how can anyone have any forecast on what's going to happen with something that's not happened before?
Yes, but I think the point I was making there is that there is some degree of agreement across the board. If the government of the day is saying even our deal will make us less well off, it'll do the least damage to the economy. If the government of the day that wants to push this through and be seen to be honouring the referendum result is still saying it'll make us worse off, whichever way you skin this cat, can't we listen?
You're telling me that, Sheila, that there's no chance that they could be wrong?
Well, you've got to listen to some of the experts, haven't you? You've got to listen to some of the people who do economic forecasting and modelling, don't you?
Yeah.
And then say it doesn't feel right to me, I won't do it. Let's jump off that cliff anyway.
The government did that during the referendum and told us that we'd go into a economic collapse, we'd have a recession. They've already done that.
No, a campaigning side of a campaign to leave the European Union gave you those models, which happened...
Yeah, but that was the government. It was the government that took the stance that we should stay within the European Union. That was David Cameron's stance.
Yes, but this government is now doing it and still telling you it's not going to be great. So do you think Theresa May, when she's prepared to say that, is actually secretly hoping for a people's vote? I don't. I think she's just telling you the truth.
Potentially. Who knows? But like I said, it's happened before. We've been told that this would happen before. It didn't happen. We're getting told now that it will happen again, that we will be worse off. Okay.
Okay. We'll be worse off, okay, says Ryan. Thank you, Ryan. Ryan in Leicester. That's the point, though, isn't it, about a general election? If anyone campaigned on this platform for a general election, they wouldn't get a single vote. Paul in Liverpool, you voted to leave. Still want to leave?
I certainly do.
Yeah.
Sheila, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure.
I feel so depressed. I mean, as a British community, we're getting made to feel as if we just can't survive ourselves in the world. I mean, my understanding is about 85% of our trade is done internally. There's about 15%, I think, done externally. And of that, maybe 3 or 4% is with the EU. Therefore, of our total trade, 3 to 4% is perhaps with the EU, which may be the key bits. It's at risk. What's wrong with us actually going out and buying British cars, rather than drinking German beers, drink British beers, eat British cheeses, British meat? We'll be able to eat more fish when we catch the fish ourselves. I'm sure any deficit possibly that we might encounter, if we actually all thought about it ourselves and went out and supported our own internal markets and our own internal jobs, we could actually weather that storm without any great problems. And nobody seems to focus on this. It's all doing us down. We're going to suffer. We can't survive. I'm sorry.
I don't think you got your figures quite right, Paul. I've just got the figures here up. The 44% of UK trade is with the EU.
Yeah, but you're discounting the internal trade.
I'm not. I'm just saying that 44% of UK trade.
External trade, Sheila, you've got to get this right. It's external trade with the EU. You're ignoring our...
Oh, you mean trading outside our own shores? I understand, yeah.
Yes, that's right. You're ignoring what we make and trade internally between ourselves. And I understand it's about 85%.
I'm not ignoring it. I'm just focusing on the fact that right under our noses, is one of the world's biggest markets, and we're in it, and we have frictionless trade, tariff-free trade within it largely, and that's something to be valued, isn't it? I mean, we can turn our backs on it, but and actually with Theresa May's deal, we don't fully turn our backs on it. We just change our relationship with it. That's worth stressing as well. But again, I go back to what our own Chancellor has said today. The man whose job it is to strengthen the UK economy has said that he and his government, Theresa May's government, are knowingly making moves that will weaken it. That just seems odd. I've never known a politician be so open about damaging the nation.
But again, you've got to say it's 44% of what, maybe 15% of our total trade, so it might make up 5-6% of our total trade. We can mitigate some of that damage by buying British. I also don't believe these forecasts. I mean, you don't and I don't know what's going to happen to us tomorrow. No one's got a perfect crystal ball. They've been wrong in the past. They'll be wrong again. I think it's the establishment again trying to frighten the British people to go back, have another vote because the EU are running us.
The thing is, Paul, Theresa May doesn't want another vote unless she is literally standing up there in Parliament and lying through her teeth. She does not want another vote. She wants to be the Prime Minister that honoured the referendum and got a deal through that, by her lights, damages the economy as little as possible, given that damage was inevitable. Now, she does not want a people's vote or a general election at this point. But she's still telling you it's making us poorer.
But she's brought back a deal that nobody likes. And if you're cynical, you could argue that she brought back this deal that nobody would like, and they would have to go to a people's vote. Being a cynical person, you might take that.
Well, I tell you what, if that's what's going on, she's a blooming good actress. Paul, thank you. Rochelle, first of all, hello.
Yeah, hello.
Sheila.
Oh, sorry, Sheila.
It's okay, Rochelle.
My goodness.
Don't worry, it's about you, not me.
Listen, darling,
you fire away.
You're not my age, right? I'm 2 years from 70. Now, I worked damn hard in my life, and when I made the vote to come out, it wasn't a whim, darling, like millions of other people. We could see what was happening because Tony Blair destroyed this country. He's a Labour man. Now, he gave the banks free hand. The corruption just grew and grew and grew. And what annoys me so intensely is that the government need to realise that we pay their wage for them to do the right thing in government for the people. The people voted, to come out. They don't respect us as the people. So I think let's get rid of the government and let's start again, because at the end of the day, my lovely, there will never be a deal from Europe because the euro's worth nothing. And they've been living off of us and obviously smaller countries, but we're the largest contributors. But the difference is we've always traded around the world, the same as Europe. But at the end of the day, we've had hard times long before this, after wars, 2 world wars, whatever. And obviously when there's been, crashes through times, and everyone's lost all their savings, whatever. I'm one of them. But the thing is, at the end of the day, I want to get my country back to how it was, a beautiful-looking country. I'm afraid
But the thing is, Rochelle, no country ever goes back to how it was, and do you know why? Because a new generation. Well, you just said that. So what do you mean?
Not back to how it was, darling. I'm talking about for it to grow stronger, as it should do, but it can't because obviously there's companies that have left this country and working abroad and not giving individual the right amount of money to earn. Then Tony Blair brought in this law, zero hours contract. It's all wrong, Sheila. Even if it's just £10 an hour, people need and should be earning a certain amount.
They should, but he hasn't been in power for a long time.
I know, but the economics, right, getting back to what you've all been talking about, we will be better out, believe me. Out, because for the simple reason we will work harder, the country will prosper, and we will do very well. Thank you very much. With us paying this billion, whatever it is, a day, that money could be used in this country to improve our status, the medical situation, whatever. And people that come from abroad over the last 40 years have never paid a penny. It's not...
Okay, the medical situation, whatever. That's where you lost me, Rochelle. Thank you very much for your call. Steve in Marlborough, hi.
Hi, Sheila. I'm just at my wit's end with the whole thing, really. I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, you're well educated, that when Mark Carney was Bank of England, 4 times in the month before we left, and once on the steps of the Bank of England, he stood up and said we would need an emergency budget before Christmas, at least 1 emergency budget, if not 2. The economy would fold and GDP would fall for the foreseeable future while we were in a Brexit negotiations. That was then backed up by, you'll probably remember this as well, it was backed up by George Osborne. George Osborne then said, shortly after that he foresaw at least 1 emergency budget and a collapse in GDP. I run a small business, most of my friends do. We're doing very nicely, thank you. I work in the business community. And also, actually, while I'm on, I also work for charity, and I work for a major medical charity, and I spend a lot of time with not journalists or people who think they know what they're talking about, professors of medicine, and I have a kidney transplant. So one of my concerns is, will I get my medication? All of my medication comes from the Far East, actually. And one of the doctors, who obviously I can't name, is a very senior person, said he's never heard such a lot of nonsense. So there are lots of facts. The other thing is these are forecasts, and as we know, clearly Mark Carney and George Osborne got their forecast pre-Brexit spectacularly wrong. They couldn't have got it more wrong.
But why is the government that is pushing through Brexit now for you? Why are they saying no Brexit will be without damage?
Theresa May does not want Brexit. Sheila, if you've got a base belief in life, whether or not it's religious, whether or not it's a business belief, if you don't believe in something, you won't strive to make that work.
So she's pretending all along.
I think she's partially pretending, and I think she's completely misguided. To be honest, I think I don't envy the woman. I don't like her. I think she was completely stitched up, but she's in it over her head. She is completely incompetent, and she.
Well,
is
hang on.
just
Rather than
floundering.
just attack her, just let me be clear. You think Theresa May, all that she is doing in this fortnight is actually to derail her own Brexit deal?
I think she's doing that. Yeah, I think.
Okay, I have to leave you there, Steve. I just wanted to be clear that that's what you were saying. Even I don't think that. I think she's said all kinds of things that she doesn't then go on to mean, but I don't think this is one of them. Steve, thank you, Steve, in Marlborough.
David's in Snowdon, lovely part of the world. David, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Always a pleasure.
Carry on.
In the wind and the rain.
Yes, I was in Brecon at the weekend, and I mean, closer to your neck of the woods than I've been in a while. You're very, very lucky. Anyway, carry on.
Okay, I'll tell you what it is. When you come out with these experts and that, and he comes across as a very genuine guy, and he comes across as a guy that is putting a lot of effort into his job. But when I hear you come out with these experts and that, to me, I'm just a layperson. I'm just a worker. And these people are running the company. It's like Gina Miller. When she talks, she talks about the country as if it's a limited company. And for me, I don't see the same things as these people. I don't see these. I'm not going to get these vast profits due to mass migration. I'm not going to get these vast profits due to trade and everything.
Have you got a mortgage?
1,000 jobs. Sorry?
Have you got a mortgage?
Yeah, I have got a mortgage.
But
I will never
have interest
ever
rates.
be able to
You have
afford...
interest rates on your mortgage.
Yeah, well,
so that's the top
I mean,
line
it's
of
fixed
Mark
mortgage anyway.
The top line of Mark Carney's analysis is, of course, house prices and interest rates, which has nothing to do with big business and everything to do with people like you, David.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, if I was going to lose some money on my house and that, I mean, house prices are over-exaggerated anyway. I mean, they've gone berserk.
You want to lose money on your house?
I do, well, nobody wants to lose money, but I think in a modern society, I think
if the house comes down in value, if interest rates go up and the house comes down in value, you could end up owing more than the house is worth, of course.
But you also assume that I could afford to actually sell my house, and the way
I'm
things
not assuming anything, mate. You're the one that wants it to be worth less than it is now.
I will probably be in this house until I die because I couldn't afford to.
Well, let's hope that you don't move into negative equity then, because unless your income goes up, which he's also saying it won't, you could end up not able to meet your own.
But it has.
Not able
Since
to meet
the
your own
Brexit
mortgage
vote,
payments. So let's just go back.
James.
Hang on, mate. I want to go back to what you
James, can I just say, no, you pulled me up on the thing there. You said about negative equity.
Yes.
Right? And since the Brexit vote, and since the flood from the EU has been drying up a bit, there is a lot more work, there's a lot more opportunity, and the wages have gone up.
Well,
so
for you?
For Brexit
For you?
has been sort of great for me and the wife.
What line of work are you in?
Well, I do, mine is sort of applied physics and that. I do research and development, but hers is
So you've got your wages gone up in the last 3 years as an applied physicist doing research and development. Did you hear Sir Paul Nurse on the programme?
Especially with the wife's pharmacy, because what was happening was these companies were going abroad and they were recruiting pharmacists from abroad.
Right.
So the wages here just dropped because there was this influx of pharmacists.
Okay.
Since the Brexit vote, it's dried up a bit. So the wages have gone up. There's loads more work. It's great. It's happy days.
Okay, so I believe you, mate. Seriously, most people listening do as well, I'm sure. And I mean, the former head of the Royal Society, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist Sir Paul Nurse, when he explained that scientific research, which is what you do, will be absolutely decimated by Brexit. He's probably wrong as well, is he?
Well, it wasn't before, because you had Brian Cox on him. Funny enough, I actually was taught physics by one of Brian Cox's.
But I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about
Brian.
I'm talking about Sir Paul Nurse.
Yeah. And if you can let me answer you,
you're talking about Brian Cox.
Before all this, you were saying about how are we going to sort of our standards and everything, how are we going to, sort of meet these regulations with Europe?
No, I never said that, mate. I'm enjoying talking to you, but you're saying I've said things that I've never said. So here's why you rang in. You rang in to say Mark Carney doesn't really speak about things that are relevant to me.
Yeah, I can't really relate to him.
Can I just have a little go?
Sure.
Thanks, mate.
Go on, have a pop.
No, it's not a pop. I just want to remind you of what you said.
Okay.
Because often these people forget. You said that he doesn't really speak about things that affect you. So I mentioned mortgages and interest rates, and you ended up effectively saying that it will be okay if your house goes down in value and your mortgage goes up. Now, hand on heart, you don't mean that, do you?
If I sometimes think that...
No, again, hand on heart, you don't mean that, do you? If I said now, here's the choice, okay? Here is tomorrow. Your house is worth less and your mortgage costs more, or you stay where you are now. What would you choose, David?
If it meant a good...
No, David, simple, A or B.
If it meant that my children could afford houses and they could have a better future...
So you're on the radio now saying you want your house... You want your house to go down in value and you want your mortgage payments to go up.
Nobody wants it, but I would accept it for a better future for my children.
So that's what I'm asking. Do you want
the country.
Okay, so you think your children are going to have a better chance of getting on the housing ladder if interest rates go up?
My children would have a better chance if the houses came down in price, because there's no way... there's no point in saying...
Why would people sell their... Why would people be more likely to sell their house if it's come down in value? It's a supply and demand issue at the moment.
Well, they're not, but when they build new houses, you want to see the new houses around here. They're executive houses that I couldn't afford.
Okay.
So how are children going to be able to afford these things?
Yeah, I hear you. And they're going to be able to afford them a lot more easily if interest rates go up. So we'll just agree. We'll park that. Simple question.
Well, no, but the prices will come down.
Yeah, the prices will come down, and that's good because you want your house to be worth less. We've already established that.
Yeah, but you're talking hypetical, aren't you?
Well,
again,
everything's hypothetical. It's an economic forecast that you
Exactly.
David,
You just hit it on the nail.
Yes, well, hit the nail on the head is the phrase you're looking for, but everybody listening already knew that. So here's the thing. Why do you think Mark Carney exaggerates or fibs? What do you think's in it for him?
I don't think he does.
So he's right then? He's right about everything?
He looks at things from a totally different perspective. Things that affect big business and they affect people who've got
it's
millions
mortgage
of pounds.
rates and house prices. How can you say that only affects...
It won't affect my children. If the house prices drop down by a third tomorrow, my children would be better off in that. At least they could raise a deposit.
I love you, mate, and I hope you're right. I really do, for your children's sake. The worst recession since the 1930s, and you think it would be great.
No, I didn't say it would be great. I was saying you've got a different interpretation.
Well, I have, yeah. I think crashes are really bad. Really bad. And you don't. And that's fine. Back to the question of why Mark Carney would fib. Neil's in Market Drayton. Neil, why do you think he's fibbing?
Good morning, James. Well, basically, I'm going to sit down because I was a UKIP chairman in North Shropshire. And basically, if you look at over the time of when Brexit actually started and before, the message is quite clear that there was the Project Fear, as they call it. I don't like these names people give to these things, but it was Project Fear. And I think a lot of the information coming out, especially for Mark Carney, who seemed to be part of that, it's just being repeated. It is actually fear. I mean, we all knew that the country would go through some period of chaos, if you want to put it that way.
UKIP's official position was that we'd be immediately better off. But you don't need me to tell you that.
No, it wasn't.
You were a chairman. Well, the leader said that, of course.
No. On many TV interviews, I do listen to your programme regularly, actually, because I'd like to know what the other side are saying.
Yes,
It's
what it feels like to be right, mate.
Well, that's your opinion.
No, it's not, you see. It's not an opinion.
Well, it is. If you think you're right, it's an opinion, isn't it?
No, it isn't. No. What's 2 plus 2? What's 2 plus 2?
Anyway.
All right, you carry on. So why do you think, what's in it for Mark Carney? Why do you think he fibs and exaggerates?
Well, it's all part of the system, isn't it, basically?
I don't know. I want you to tell me.
Well, this is what I've gathered over the time of listening. I mean, there was plenty of information out there given to people if they wanted to attend meetings. I organised loads of meetings. So the information was out there. It was obviously if people wanted to actually take it up and listen.
Forgive me, I'm just going to push you towards the question that I'm asking, because let's say you're right and it is just opinions. So why do you think, in your opinion, the Governor of the Bank of England is lying to the country?
Because they just don't want to take us out of the EU.
Why not?
Why?
Yeah.
Because I think I've been looking at these. I really do think that it's going to open a can of worms. We was never informed.
What's going to open a can of worms?
It's going to. Well, if we come out of the EU,
yes,
okay, it's going to open It will open up all the information that our ex-politicians like Blair, Brown, Major signed us up to. Okay.
Right, so there's secret stuff. There's secret stuff that's only going to come out after we leave. Well, what then? There's stuff that we don't already know, is there, Neil?
Well, the reasons why the politicians, it's only the major politicians, our servants, who are actually wanting us to stay in the EU.
Well, it was half the country that voted as well, and most polls now have a majority for remaining. You're not suggesting that 48% of the country was all politicians, are you?
No, I think through the media.
Yeah.
And the discrimination against
80% pro-leave media. 80%, according to conservative estimates of newspaper coverage, was in favour of leaving.
Okay, well, most of the coverage I always saw...
Well, what papers do you read?
Sky News.
What papers?
I don't read any papers.
Oh, OK.
I don't read it. I don't have any...
Sky News is bound by Ofcom to be completely impartial. So where do you get your news from? What are your main news sources?
The Electoral Commission, that's supposed to be neutral, but it's mostly made up of Remainers.
OK.
OK, you're just neutrally ignored. Yeah, go on anyway.
Let's have another crack at the question that you rang in to answer. What do you think motivates Mark Carney to... Well, let's just stay with fibbing and exaggerating, and let's maybe save for another day the idea that there's lots and lots of secrets that are going to come out after we leave. And So why do you think he's lying then? What's in it for him?
What's in it for him? Basically, well, I don't know what drives Mark Carney, but all I can say is being on the outside...
But when you look at him and you think, well, he's not telling the truth, you must surely somewhere in your brain there's a voice that says, why isn't he telling the truth? So why do you think he's lying now?
For the past 10 years, I've been following the European Union.
Right, but you don't read any papers.
I don't need to, because I can think for myself. I don't need newspapers.
No. So how do you follow the European Union without reading reports? What reports do you rely on of the European Union?
Well, I did. Well, I did listen to the news.
Right.
I get most of my stuff off the internet.
Oh, I see. So, I mean, whether it's off the internet or not, again, why do you think he fibs and lies? What do you think is in it for him, Neil?
Well, as I said,
yeah,
because I've delved into the subject of the EU.
Well, that's why I can't wait to hear what you found.
It's simply because people who actually, as you say, see the light, okay, about what's really going on.
Can I just steer you back to Mark Carney?
Yeah. No, but it's all part of it, isn't it, James? You can't just.
Well, I don't know part of what. I'm
Basically,
getting,
the 10 years I've been following the EU, right, it's quite obvious that there's the new world or the new order agenda going on.
The new world order agenda.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Mark Carney's part of that, is he?
Yes.
What is the new world order agenda? What are they hoping to achieve, Neil?
Well, you know yourself.
I've got no idea, mate. I've got no idea.
You do. You've been told loads of times. They want to create what I call USSR.
Okay.
And basically, you know, we was told when you saw the Farage and Clegg debate, and Clegg turned around and actually said about not having an EU army.
Because we would have a veto, Neil, if we were in the EU. So what he said was we could never sign up to an army we didn't want because we'd be able to veto it as members.
You say this, but how do you know in the future? How do you know? I mean, it's like this backstop,
Lordy. So, last question again.
No, it's like the backstop.
It's just like the backstop, yeah, you're right. Is that the New World Order as well?
May has turned around and said that we wouldn't have to stay in it long. But you don't believe the politicians because they've told us loads of lies in the past.
Well, you do believe some politicians, oddly. So let's focus on that question there. And I don't know whether it's part of the New World Order or you found it on the internet, but why is Mark Carney not telling the truth, Neil?
Well, I've already explained that,
you haven't, mate. What's in it for him? What's his reward as a Canadian banker from the EU SSR, as you like to call it?
Okay, you're asking me to make an opinion, right?
No, I'm asking what thinking has informed your opinion. I know your opinion.
He's lying.
Yes,
he's
here we
lying because everything that has been said against the EU has been opened up, and it's totally true.
Right.
It's totally true. It's like you said, you've got to do your research, haven't you?
Well,
you've got to do your research. So I've done research for over 10 years.
Well, then, could you please just tell me what is Mark Carney's reward for telling these lies?
Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? Well, you do, mate.
Who knows?
Because you're the one who thinks he's lying. I don't think he is. So if I thought he was lying, I'd be able to tell you why he was lying. I'd be able to say, for example, well, that fella over there with the
I've just told you why he's lying.
Go on, why?
I've followed everything that the EU has been doing, and I've listened to both sides. Listen, do you really think that if you... Do you realise that... Oh, sorry, I don't mean to be rude on that. Do you think that if everything... No, don't do it. If you think...
You're not going to answer my question, are you, mate?
I've answered it.
When you said who knows.
You've got to know what's been said, and you've got to have done your research, like you keep saying. And basically, everything that has been said that the EU wouldn't do, the EU is doing.
Yeah.
Like the European Army. That was 10 years. People knew about this who did Brexit. Over 10 years
but
ago.
it can be vetoed by. I mean, we are going round in circles, mate. But I've enjoyed talking to you, Neil. I hope you have a lovely Christmas.
I know he's a moron.